first I was curious what the attendance would be like, because living in State College, a college football hotbed, and a town that 7 fall Saturdays a year is unhinged on game week. And I think there's nothing like the Wednesday and Thursday when people start coming into town, and the Friday leading up to the game, the excitement, the energy in a college town. I love that. I love that buzz that you get the days leading up to a big game, to any game, but in particular, a big game in a place like Penn State, where the RVs line up days in advance. They're parked at Walmart, they're parked at Target, and then they finally get a chance to get into the tailgating lots, and downtown is bustling. And I think you get that across the Big Ten at a lot of these schools in the Big Ten. So I was curious, though, what would the attendance be like? Because here in State College and living here, I didn't feel that hype, that buzz. I felt like, well, is it because Penn State could be one of the top 5 teams in the country next year? Not really a lot of unknowns. You bring your quarterback back, your running backs back, your offensive line back. Jim Knowles has a lot of pieces returning on defense, really strong secondary, a couple of key cogs in Zane Durant and Denai Dennis Sutton on that defensive line. Was it because the season went so long, and not just at Penn State, but the Ohio State Notre Dame National Championship, that's late January. You have all the talk about the portal, the playoff format, name, image, likeness, the house settlement. I just felt like there might be some sport fatigue right now going on in the world of college football. Everyone knows what the discourse has been about these spring games. Is this the last edition of the Penn State blue-white game? Who knows? So I was curious, and I'll be honest, when I was out there on Saturday and it was raining in the morning, but then sun came out, ended up being a really comfortable, nice, it was a windy day. There were a lot of people there. A lot of people there. And the stadium's under construction. So there's a lot of moving parts. But I got to give it to the Penn State fans. This west side closed off due to construction, but south, north, east, lower deck, I was really impressed. I think they estimated somewhere in the 50,000 range. I don't know if there are 50,000 people in the stadium, but even 30 to 40,000, potentially the number, 25, 30, 40,000 in the stadium watching, and people come and go. It's free admission. I was really surprised by the turnout based on how I thought there was so little buzz leading up to it. And that, again, shows you the power of this sport, shows you the power of these brands, that on a late April Saturday where there's so much going on, it's late in the semester, graduation's on the horizon, Easter was last week, it's the same weekend as the NFL draft. Here you still have 30, 40,000 people, 50,000 people, if that's the number you want to use, turning out to see the spring game. And I'm like, man, college football is so powerful. So, and I was really surprised. I really was surprised by that because of the lack of buzz going into it.
The buzz, I think, is tough just because so many programs are saying we don't want to do this, or we're going to have a different format. So I think it's tough from fans' perspectives to get excited about something that you, number one, are unsure about. And number two, that basically coaches and the entire sport are saying, we don't really like doing this. We don't really want to do it. I think that's maybe why there was lack of buzz. And honestly, that number surprised me. I thought it'd be a lot lower just because I think fans care if you give them a reason to care. And I think the NBA kind of goes to this when they kind of almost poo-poo their own regular season. Then then you wonder why fans aren't as involved in a February Wednesday game because you're kind of telling them it doesn't matter. So I think if you are telling college football fans, the spring game doesn't really matter, we're going to go through kind of the motions here, who cares? I think you'll see, that number is lower than what spring games before. And you'll see that, I'm sure, across all college football, the spring game number is lower than what they've previously been. But still, college football is king. College football is legit. There's a lot of passion there. And even if it's a glorified practice, people want to see.
And I made this comment on the radio towards the end of the game, and I'm not sure if it has to do with the television or non-television aspect or not, but from watching what occurred, and they weren't out there incredibly long, probably about 90, 95 minutes, I felt like you saw more valuable reps than in the previous 10 years, dating back the last 10 years. Drew Aller it started, they did 7-on-7. So basically you're thrown against air. Like you have the 7-on-7. There's no rush. They did 6 plays for the white team and 6 plays for the blue team. And then the first quarter was touch or thud. The second quarter was touch or thud. Third and fourth quarter, running clock, live tackling. And even in the thud, obviously there's no hitting. You're not bringing guys to the ground. I thought you would see a lot of Jackson Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer and no Katron Allen and no Nicholas Singleton and not any razzle dazzle. They played their guys. They had them out there. And you only get 15 practices. You don't want to forfeit one of those 15 practices, especially when you're working with a new defensive coordinator. I know that's the other side of the ball. You don't want to forfeit one of those 15 practices. And then when they went live in the third quarter, yeah, Zane Durant may not have been out there. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen may not have been out there, but Drew Aller sure was. So was Devontae Ross, the transfer from Troy, at wide receiver. So was Kyron Hudson at wide receiver. And they made a distinct effort to throw the ball in that live session with Aller and those wide receivers. And you got a real look at not only how Andy Kotelnicki may utilize a guy like a Devontae Ross, but the talents of Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson. And I'll be honest with you, I came away. It's a spring game. It's 1s against 2s, although I feel like Penn State's defensive secondary is incredibly deep. I think that's one of my takeaways from that game. But I was really, really impressed. And this is right as the news is breaking that they're getting a transfer wide receiver. I was really, really impressed with Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson. Hudson's got size. He went up and climbed the ladder on a ball over the middle. Aller threw it a little bit high, but he went up and made the catch. His route running was precise. You can see that he can work both the inside and outside of the field. Ross ran a couple of deep out routes, and his timing with Aller for having just gotten together this spring was really, really good. You could see Kotelnicki was using him in different ways, getting him the ball, coming across the backfield, getting it to him quickly in the flat, and then also trying to throw the ball deep. And then a couple other guys at that wide receiver position for Penn State. Tyseer Denmark, I thought, looked really good. Lyric Samuel, someone that James Franklin, a freshman wide receiver, he's talked a lot about during the spring. He did some really good things. And Liam Clifford was actually pretty involved as well in what they did offensively. One of those holdover, stalwart veteran guys that is trying not to get lost in the shuffle as they bring in Pena, the wide receiver from Syracuse, too, reportedly. So I was really impressed with that wide receiver group and the chemistry. And I asked James Franklin about it afterwards. I said, where do you feel like your passing game's at? We know you got Singleton and Allen and an offensive line and Drew back. Where's your passing game at? He's like, based on where we're at now, happy, but also still a lot of work to do. And if there's one element of your game that you can still really improve on over the summer compared to any other element, it's the passing game, because the quarterback can go out and work with those wide receivers, develop that chemistry and synergy, and you don't need coaches there to do it. And you can't have coaches there to do it. And he felt like if there was one area that they wanted to continue to see growth and improvement, and I think they're ahead of schedule there, but the one area you can continue to do that in over the course of the summer is that passing game. So my two biggest impressions, probably number one, the crowd support that was there. But number two, I was really impressed with the wide receivers and the depth that they had at that position. And obviously the top two guys seem like they're going to be improvements over Harrison Wallace III and Amari Evans. And then you bring another guy in, freshman, young guys. You know, Denmark was a freshman last year. Seems like they're taking another step. That is now becoming not a position of need for Penn State, but perhaps a position of depth for Penn State on a Penn State team that has high aspirations to win a national championship. And many think have a chance to do it this year. And they'll do it not just because of their elite high-end talent, but we talked about this on the broadcast, myself, Steve Jones, and Jack Ham, maybe as deep a Penn State team that's ever been assembled, because at running back, Singleton and Allen are different level guys, but they're 3 or 4 deep there. There's a legitimate competition between Grunkemeyer and Smolik at quarterback. wide receiver now, bringing another guy, you're starting to get some depth there where you don't have to rush a Peter Gonzalez or a Tysier Denmark or a Lyric Samuel or a Kobe Howard onto the field. Tight end, Khalil Dinkins is an excellent blocking tight end. He's been really good in the red zone. Look forward to seeing what he does with more reps. It seemed like he had really good chemistry with Drew Aller when he was in there, and a guy who can make catches. Plus, you're going to complement him with what I think is an emerging star in Luke Reynolds, who had a big year as a freshman last year, and Andrew Rappelier and Joey Schlaffer. When Rappelier gets back, Penn State's offensive line is incredibly, incredibly deep. They have a lot of guys who are on the second team that would be first team starters across the Big Ten. Secondary is really, really deep at safety and at cornerback. And it's odd to talk about this, but the two positions that I feel most concerned about their depth on what is a deep team are actually linebacker. And I think their starters are really good, but a lot of unknowns behind him. That's not saying that Anthony Specca, I think, is going to be really good. Dakari Nelson's going to be good and valuable, but you probably would like a little more veteran depth there. And the same probably at the defensive line spot right now. Zariah Fisher's coming off a couple of injuries. Could have a really good year across from Denai Dennis Sutton at defensive end. Defensive tackle, Zane Durant's a stud. One of the best defensive linemen in all of college football and a game changer from the defensive tackle position. Thought it was critical that they brought him back. But then, Alonzo Ford, when he gets back from injury, Xavier Gilliam, who else is going to be at that, the transfer they brought in from Michigan, who else is going to be at that defensive tackle spot? So they might have the guys there already in place, but they're unknowns. But overall, those are the three things. Obviously, crowd, receivers, but then the overall depth of the Penn State football team is particularly impressive, especially on offense. Wow.
And I think the receivers, I mean, that's clearly writing music to every Penn State fan's ears, because that's, I think, when you look at Penn State and you highlighted just the depth overall, the biggest question I think they have going into this year is receiver. And I think when you see how last year ended, losing to Notre Dame, Drew Aller throwing the pick and having receivers register 0 catches in that playoff game against Notre Dame, that I think when you look at Penn State and how far they end up going in 2025, I think the biggest thing you can point to is how good that receiver room is. If they are as good as maybe the hype says and what the projections are, Penn State's a legitimate national title contender. If we've seen that receiver room go the way they have the last 2 or 3 years, it feels like despite the talent, the depth, everywhere else, like if that position holds you back, it's really, really difficult to win a national title. So I think like that scouting report should be music to everyone from Penn State's fans' ears. And if you are Ohio State, Oregon, et cetera, teams that are looking to, knock off Penn State, that should be, again, it's a spring game, it's one practice. We're not going to get crazy, but a good, still a positive report is better than a negative report. That's one where there should be concern, because if Penn State figures out receiver, it feels like everything else around him will be figured out and be playing at a high level.
Yeah, and I apologize because it was a pretty long report that I gave back on the game. But
you are the only person we can get information from, so that was needed, because otherwise it's a few tweets and 1 or 2 videos from the stands. Thank you.
And I'll say this too. I think the wide receivers have really grown over the course of the spring, and obviously my observations, I've not been able to get to practices that I've hoped to get to over the course of the spring due to other commitments. But it wasn't just that game, from what I understand, that the receivers have been particularly impressive. I know James has talked about it at his press conference. Drew's talked about it a lot, his chemistry, synergy, how good he feels about that room there. So I don't think it's just that one practice where, they flashed today, and they're doing it against a great secondary. AJ Harris could be a first-round NFL draft pick next year. Zion Tracy, Elliott Washington. I thought Darius Dixon had a great spring game on Saturday. You can see the physicality there. Jim Knowles, the confidence that they already have in him, talking to some of the players, how they believe in his system. This is a group that feels like a team that went to the playoffs last year, felt like being around them on Saturday. We know what we got. There's still work to do. They're hungry. They want to get back there. But it just had the feel of not a college team where, there's some unpredictability to it. Or, I wonder what this season's going to be like. It felt like being around a professional, okay, take care of the game, take care of this, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. It just felt so buttoned up. And I think Drew Aller looked a little slimmer. I think he looked really mobile. I think he looked athletic. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton both lost weight during the offseason. They look slimmer. I think they look a half step faster, which is really dangerous. And even more powerful and explosive for each of them. I think they had a really good, albeit short, spring. And this seems like a group that knows what the expectations are, because that's the biggest thing with this team. How you have to stay healthy. But now that you've gotten there and had success there, winning 2 playoff games, you can say whatever you want about the opponents. They still won 2 playoff games. It's on their resume. Now that they're there and you have all this talk about what's coming back, how do you handle that? How are you equipped to handle that? Penn State always has expectations. It's not like all of a sudden there's expectations at Penn State. Penn State always had expectations. But now there's an increased sense of urgency of, well, if you don't do it this year, when everyone's saying this is the year, and how they navigate that, which I think they'll be equipped to perfectly because they have a coach who is as consistent, reliable, 1-0, day-to-day, process-driven. I don't think that changes with them. And I asked him about that after the game, like, how do you handle it now? He's like, we approach it the same way we always do. And I think people think it's cliche. I think they think it's corny. But I'll tell you what, it works, and he's great at it. And they all believe in that messaging, and they all repeat that messaging. And I think that's why they're equipped to handle what is a It's not like they don't have expectations before. It's Penn State. There's always expectations. But now it's almost, you got all these guys returning. It's boom or bust with this group. How do you navigate that? Because there are going to be, at some point of the year, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be obstacles. There are going to be hurdles. It may not come in the form of a loss. It may come in the form of injuries. It may come in the form of something that happens or is said. But how do you handle that? And that's going to be very interesting to see. But I think they're equipped. I think they've got the right group to do it.
And not that you're going to, I mean, you can just look at the last 2 national champions. Michigan in 2023 kind of did the same thing, right? Loaded up immense pressure to kind of, this is a do or die year, broke through and won. Ohio State, insane pressure last year. All they brought back, all the portal additions, they broke through and won. Both teams, for different reasons, like you said, not just a loss, but for different things that happened, they both faced adversity. They both had a great culture, and the talent plus the culture equaled winning a national title. Like you said, we won't like Penn State's shown the ability to be resilient before, but like a new group every single year, how do you respond? You won't truly know until you face that moment of adversity at some point, early, middle, late in the year. The last 2 national champions had a lot of talent, but also expectation. They harnessed that for positive. Penn State, I think there's right now every reason to believe they can follow in Michigan and Ohio State's footsteps here in 2025 and do the same thing. Kind of the arrow right now, like you said, is pointing up. There's a lot of excitement and buzz, if you will, coming out of Happy Valley as we get set for a huge 2025 season trip.
I just want to put one more thing out there to put a bow on this discussion on the spring. And I know fans and reporter, everyone got a sense to see it over the course of the spring. A lot of guys out, but that means valuable reps for younger guys. And I think long-term that will pay off dividends. Tyler Warren, I think they talked about it, didn't do a ton last spring anyway. So we talked about this on the broadcast with a guy like Zane Durant, Deni Dennis Sutton, Singleton, Allen, even Khalil Dinkins, some of the linemen. You now are managing a 16, 17 game season.
Yeah.
That's different than managing a 12, 13 game season. How do you manage? You need to win every game. You want to win every game. You want to win every day. But it is no longer just a sprint in college football. It is a marathon in college football. And there really is something to how do you attack a long-term plan now versus just a short-term Okay, it's a sprint from September to the start of December. Go. Now it's how do we approach our spring, our summer, our camp? Now a season that extends September, October, November, December, multiple games, January, multiple games. And I think the value of the reps for some of the depth guys, even though you may have had some guys out for the spring that you really wish were out there, could end up paying dividends for a team like them as well.